I assume. So welcome along everybody to the fourth or fifth, I think it's fourth edition of the Question Corner. I put the number 4 there and I'm assuming it's correct. This is where we answer questions about Camunda things. We tend to, whatever Camunda stuff pops into your head, we will answer them. We have actually got 3 hosts this week. We have myself, Niall D. I'm a developer advocate with Camunda. You probably have, if you've kind of been in the Camunda ecosystem for the last little while or part of the community, then you've probably bumped into me at some stage, either on the forum, maybe some tutorials I've done, that sort of thing. My basic role is in DevRel is to help people understand and implement the Camunda BPM platform. Also, as well as taking Camunda questions, I will also be taking questions about Roman history between 38 BCE to 400 CE. That's just a point of interest in case people decide that they are interested in that. Join me, as always, is Nele Uleman, a consultant from Camunda. Nele, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, as Niall said, my name is Nele. I'm working as a consultant. That means I'm basically doing trainings for our customers and see what sort of stuff they build with Camunda. And yeah, I'm happy to help you with Camunda questions. And additionally, Niall gave me another category. I'm also happy to answer any questions about environmentalism. That's a hard word, Niall.
I was inspired by Nele's garden, which she's in right now, which shows a certain amount of a green thumb, certainly. And our very special guest, of course, this week is Mauricio Salatino, joining DevRel, my team as well. Mauricio, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. As Niall mentioned, my name is Mauricio, also known as Salaboy in the community. You can follow me at Twitter at Salaboy as well. And I'm responsible for helping the Zeebe community to grow, building all the integration with Kubernetes and cloud environments and cloud tools. I've been working on that for the last 6-7 months now, and I'm quite excited to be here because it's great to see people asking questions about this project.
Thank you so much, Mauricio. And we shall quickly go into the how to ask questions. First of all, we use this wonderful little tool called Slido. There are a couple of ways to get there. Right now in your chat should be posted a wonderful little link to the question thing. They're fantastic. Look at that, right on time. You can also scan this QR code with your phone and have the questions there on your phone. There are 2 ways in which you might want to get us to answer questions. Way the first is you could actually ask a question on your own, type something in and then add it. But very likely there is something very similar already posted. So feel free to use the upvotes there and we will be able to answer those questions subsequently based on how popular the votes are for those. So how does that look? Well, eventually we'll get to the point where I will show this lovely screen, which shows so far a whole bunch of questions that have been asked over the last 4 or 5 days where we've had the thing live, as well as the most recent question. What will happen is I will, of course, pick a question. If it's a Zeebe-oriented question, sadly, it is beyond my knowledge, so I will throw it to Salaboy. If there's some BPMN questions, myself sorry, Nele can answer those. She's an expert in that, and I'll answer whatever is left over theoretically correctly. So the next thing to show you guys is this is a poll that is now gone live. So if you guys are already on Slido, you should see this lovely poll that is up and alive. And if you log in, and I'd be interested in just finding out, because of course this is the first time we've addressed Zeebe questions specifically. I'm interested in what people already know about Zeebe, if they're planning on using it. So you can log into the thing now and you can just take a look at that. Okay, how are we doing? Ooh, a lot of votes. I'll wait for this poll to make itself known. Interesting, we have such an interesting group there. We have not at all of all time use equal. That's really interesting.
That's really nice, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So that's really handy. It means that hopefully we'll get Salaboy to help people understand a little bit about Zeebe when he answers the questions, and also a little bit about the more advanced topics for the main users. We have, and I plan to as well, that's really, really great. If you're having any problems with Slido, just put it in the chat. So we also have, of course, the regular chat function for Zoom. This can be used to say hello if you like, or comment about how fancy my tie is. All of those are very, very happy. Mauricio has already said hello, quick work. But of course, because we will be using the questions from Slido primarily for that. So any questions put into the Zoom chat, we'll probably won't see them or won't have time to answer them. So just be aware of that. Okay, so that's 12 answers. It looks like a lot of people very new to Zeebe, so that's hopefully a useful thing for people to get used to. So with that said, let's crack on. I assume let's, how do I crack on with this? I assume I click exit. No, I'll click on this button. Okay, so let's kick off. So how are my strawberries? I will take this one very quickly because this is, some would say, an inside joke. Anyone who was at the Berlin meetup a little while ago will have noticed that I think I had a picture of my strawberries and the code studio as well. Since the lockdown has started, I started growing strawberries, none of which have died, and I have harvested exactly 9 strawberries, okay? In case people were wondering, so they are doing incredibly well. I will mark this question as answered. I hope they won't die. Okay. So next up, we have a pretty obvious question there for Salaboy. Very, very broad, but I'll throw it to you anyway. What is the best way to set up the Zeebe environment?
That's a very good question. And I think that the question came up because in general, you have so many options to do that nowadays, right? So when you're working with these more cloud native designs, you always ended up using containers. That basically means that you ended up having at least 3 or 4 ways of getting started with Zeebe. One is by running binaries in your local environment. The second option is using something like Docker for starting all the containers that are going to create the Zeebe cluster. And the third one might be running everything in Kubernetes. If you are looking at Kubernetes, there is a set of Helm charts that were created to simplify the installation process. A Helm chart is kind of like a package that you can install in your cluster by just running one command. And you can go to helm.zeebe.io. I'm typing the URL in the chat. And you can go there to read the instructions to get started with that. If you're looking more into the Docker Compose approach, you can go to the Zeebe repository in GitHub, and you will see there that there is a Docker Compose file that allows you to start a local environment using Docker containers. I know there are a lot of options. Sometimes it gets difficult, but it really depends on what kind of environment are you trying to set up, and what kind of project do you want to run on top of Zeebe.
Cool. I have one quick question that I've always been mildly interested in, which is around the maintenance of the Helm charts. So as well as, because Zeebe is progressing quite quickly version-wise, do the Helm charts tend to catch up with that? How is maintenance working for those?
Yeah, so this is kind of like interesting when you're working with cloud native software in general. What you try to do is you try to keep releasing. So you provide like a continuous stream of releases, right? And that's what kind of like what we are doing with the Helm charts in general. First of all, it's a community supported project right now. It's not like a Camunda official, Zeebe official project. It's just community supported and maintained. And I'm kind of like taking the lead on catching up on all the changes on the Zeebe side and also on the Helm side as well. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to catch up with the latest versions of Zeebe. But today, for example, I released a new version for Zeebe 0.23.2, which is kind of like the latest stable release that we have. And yeah, they are up to date. New charts will come as soon as we get more Zeebe releases.
Awesome. Thanks, Mauricio. Okay, I will very quickly answer this question. So this is, let's tick that one as done. Does the word justice originate from the Roman Emperor Justinian I? And how come he was born and peasant became emperor? So first of all, let me take the second part first. So Justinian I became emperor in around 438 AD. And 200 years before, Maximilian Thrax, who was born a peasant, was already emperor. So this was by no means breaking the mold. Now, it would have been sort of when the Senate had a lot more power, they controlled a very strong oligarchy. But really, by the time the crisis of the 3rd century happened, there was people who were just old soldiers becoming emperor, and in fact, maybe becoming emperor for only a series of months or even weeks. So this is not unusual. Does the word justice originate from Justinian? Almost certainly not, and just probably the way around. Considering most of the English language revolves around Roman and Greek sort of influences, I would specifically Roman, I would assume the word justice already existed before then. Now that said, he is my favorite Justinian. The following Justinians were not that great, so he was okay. But I would like to mention a caveat. I specified that I'm interested in Rome 38 BC to 400. He became emperor in 438, so this is technically out of my wheelhouse. So I'm answering the question simply to be nice. I would prefer if everyone could maybe make sure that their Roman history is between that 400 odd years, but thank you very much for the question, and thanks everyone who upvoted it for some reason. Okay.
That's good.
Next up, I'm going to give Nele, you had a question you wanted to talk about. Yes. Could be, I know you spotted this immediately, which is the asynchronous before after, because we get this a lot in the forum. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. And let me quickly share the screen so everybody knows what I'm talking about, or what that person is talking about. You need to stop sharing your screen now for that. Thank you. So if you go to the Camunda modeler, and if you start modeling something, let's say we have a start event and a task and an end event. What we can see here in the property panel, if we select an item, we see those two flags here, asynchronous before and asynchronous after. And a lot of those questions are, what is this about? Actually, it has to do with the transaction boundaries of the engine, or wait states, how they are also sometimes called. That means whenever we reach a wait state or a transaction boundary, we will commit to the database that is connected to Camunda. And there are certain things where the engine will do a commit for certain symbols. For example, if you have always like BPMN symbols that are catching, like a receive task here, that will create a natural wait state automatically in the engine. But sometimes, for example, if you use a service task, this means you will not commit to the database. And that could lead sometimes to problems, because what happens if for example, an error happens and you already did the service task, the rollback will actually happen before the start of the process. So that means you will not see that the process has started in Cockpit. You could see it in the terminal, but that's really hard to see, like, or normally you would not look into there. There's actually a nice plugin that helps you to spot the transactions. There's a transaction boundary plugin. So now we can see we have the natural transaction here. And if we want to set another transaction, maybe sometimes it's a good idea to have one for the start event, so you can kind of notice that your process has started. You can set one in the start event. Also, it depends basically what your task is doing. If you want to set certain things on your service task, for example, if it was a really expensive computation, you maybe want to make sure you don't do it again. So then you also might use the one here for after, so you make sure that you jump back to that point if there might be something. Of course, if you have a construct like this, then you have to look closely into your model if you really need something like this. Yeah, and that's basically about the transactions.
Oh, thanks, Neil. That's really great. And the plugins you're using, I want to mention, are available for free somewhere on GitHub. There's almost certainly a list of them. I'll try and find them before this thing is out, because the plugins are super handy for trying to diagnose rollback issues around the engine. So thanks for that.
I posted in the chat.
Can I maybe just a small sub question to this?
Bring it. Love sub questions.
Okay. Just to understand it correctly. So does it mean if I would just have a process which is just service tasks, a service task is also something which needs to be processed by some handler? This means that the transaction will be still one transaction through the whole process till every of the workers processed his work or processed the service tasks?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's it's a thing. If this one has no transaction, you're completely right. That would mean that we just have one single transaction. If I also don't have this one, that means we have a transaction at the end event. But now a service task, it also depends how you implement it. For a Java class and for your Java environment, it becomes true. But as soon as you switch your work, or if you switch your service task to external workers, you will get transaction boundaries as well for externals.
So yeah, Nile's exactly right. But also to add to that, that's a design decision by the engine. Transactions are a cost stuff. Transactions actually cost resources, and therefore by default there is always as few transactions as possible in a default model, to allow you then to decide how to add them. So the async before and after are there to ensure that you can decide what transactions to add. But you're right, Nele, as Nele said, if you have Java classes all the way, you could have a process that's just a single transaction the whole way.
Okay, thanks.
Cool.
I will steal back the screen from you,
okay.
Nele. Thank you very much. And I will go back here. Okay, super duper. So I will mark this. Let's first of all make the page bigger. Great. I will mark that as done. Thank you very much, Nele. We're still getting more questions in. So back at the top, our top question there is a Zeebe question for Mauricio, and it is about operate. So can I use Zeebe in production with operate? What are the main features that operate offers? If you can give us some insight there, Mauricio.
Yes, totally. So the answer is yes, completely. You can use it without operate in production. Operate basically gives you a way to monitor for issues in your workflow executions, right? And it gives you kind of like, again, as the name describes, like an operational tool to fix issues like from a UI perspective, right? I think that I send you a link, not that one. That one, yeah, that basically shows like the main screens that operates gives you. It allows you to see which process, which workflow instances are running, where they are stuck. If there is any problem with any of these executions, you can retry from there, and just make sure that your processes are all good. And also it will give you some hints about what's going wrong. And if there is a very deep technical issue that cannot be solved from here, at least you can use this to understand how to go, where to go and how to solve the problem. It's a really nice tool. At the end of the day, if you're using workflows, it's really good to have this kind of like operational tool to see how are you doing, how many workflow instances do you have at a certain point. But you can also implement that yourself, and you can use any other technology instead of using Elasticsearch as Operate is doing. So totally yes, you can use Zeebe, create a Zeebe cluster on its own, and do not install Operate if you don't want to use it. And you can leverage the use of exporters to create similar tools, maybe more integrated with your existing tools that you already have. So yeah, feel free to use it, and you don't really need to use Operate.
Cool. Thank you very, very much, Mauricio. Let's swing back to questions. I'm very disappointed, of course, to not see questions about my hawk this particular time. He may show up, who knows? But we will, let's see, we will click that as answered. This is, let's do you have any specific ones that you think, because I don't want to, I'm interested, Mauricio, in ones that you might find interesting to answer. Just, is there any there that you would like to deal with specifically?
Let's start by the first one, like the one on the top, I guess. It's like testing, how testing will work in Kubernetes. And that's a very complex question in general, right? So when we were used to work with monolith or with like normal Java applications that were running in a single JVM, testing became kind of like super easy. When you are testing, in Kubernetes, it becomes more difficult because now you might have multiple containers, and I don't want to say distributed transactions, but you will have different services doing different things, storing things in different storages. In general, what I tend to say when I get this question, which I get a lot, is you need to make sure that you don't spend a lot of time testing Zeebe itself. You need to let us and the Zeebe core team test Zeebe, and you should be worrying more about testing your services and understanding how your workflows are going to run and what you should expect from the workflow execution instead of testing CV itself. Usually there are a lot of tools coming out in the Kubernetes space to do this kind of testing and also like debugging containers. But I would tend to use these existing tools to run my tests. So for example, when you are using Kubernetes and deploying a bunch of containers, what I would do is I would create a container that it's in charge of testing that all the containers that are deployed are working correctly. You can also do chaos testing to make sure that your entire ecosystem is resilient. So killing containers and making sure that the application still responds and that the cluster automatically heal itself after a period of time. And again, it's a very complex subject that it's not completely solved in the Kubernetes community, but feel free to ask a more specific question if you want to know about testing something specific in Kubernetes.
Thanks so much, Mauricio. That was really great. I want to throw a really quick question to Nele before coming back to you, because there's a bunch of questions at the bottom that Ite put there that I'm actually interested in a whole bunch of these. I'll pick one in a few minutes, but before I do that, I will quickly ask Nele to answer this wonderful question. What is the maximum number of processes for the open source version? This is a tough one. Do you have a number for us?
I think as many as you can create or as you are able to produce and create. So we don't distinguish between enterprise and community version in the number of processes you can deploy to the engine. So you can deploy as many as it allows you, your setup and your environment. So there is no limit. If you are more interested in all the differences between the community version and the enterprise version, you can find that on our homepage. Actually, I think there's a link. There are some features in Cockpit that are not enabled for the community version, but in general, from my experience, I would say all the things that you need for developing your processes are also available in the community version, and you don't have to be worried about that, and don't be worried about the number of processes. So yeah.
I would assume that the number is limited by the database.
Yeah.
ID, right? So
that's right. It's the only limit. Yeah. I mean, you
storage.
can just, yeah.
Storage, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So, but there's no difference between the enterprise and open source, I think, is what Neil is getting to in terms of storing the number of processes. The open source version is perfectly good to use in production for whatever you want to, for everyone to use. Are there any questions there that you would like to take, Mauricio, around?
Let's go to the top. Yeah, let's go to the top for sure.
This is a big one. Key differences between Camunda and Zeebe.
Of course.
Do you want to throw some in my direction?
Yeah, totally. So I think that we can talk very, very high level here about the main differences, right? So there are like huge architectural differences between the two. There are like huge differences in terms of history as well, right? Like Camunda BPM was created a long time ago. Zeebe it's much more newer project. Zeebe is targeting cloud and microservices and cloud native architectures, which Camunda was created before that, right? Camunda can run in microservices architectures, but Zeebe it's more like basing its like core designs to make sure that it works well under a lot of pressure and in this big scale deployments. So when you go deeper and deeper, you will find like, again, key differences in the architecture. Like for example, in Zeebe, we don't have a database. In Zeebe, we implement some kind of like event sourcing and CQRS pattern. And that's kind of like following up on the question about like operate. Operate is in charge of getting data from the executions inside Zeebe and then just displaying that information that's stored in Elasticsearch. And that's completely different in Camunda BPM, where we go to the database in order to understand what's the state of the workflows that are running. So again, big differences. When do you use them? Well, it really depends on what kind of like projects are you building. If you want something that is solid and stable and well tested, you definitely will go with Camunda BPM. If you are starting a project right now and you are looking into cloud native architectures, you are planning to run on Kubernetes, you can take a look at Zeebe, or also you can take a look at Camunda Cloud, where we are dealing with all the Zeebe complexity in a managed service that you can just go and use and test for free right now.
Oh, thanks a lot, Mauricio. Actually, there's a related question to this one that I saw that I think is really good, mainly because it pits us against each other. Let's see, where is it? There was somebody asking, I think, about whether if they start a new project, whether they should use Camunda or Zeebe.
Yes.
So first of all, this is great for me because for the as we said in the introduction, we are both DevRels and we focus on different technologies. So obviously this means that we have to have some sort of physical fight once the lockdown ends in order to decide in the end which is the better orchestration engine. This is something we should definitely do as a Zoom meetup. So anybody who's interested in seeing me and Salaboy have a physical fight of some kind to determine what is better, Zeebe or Camunda, no problem, we'll make it happen. We do live in different countries, so it might take a little while. But
we need to meet. We need to meet in the middle, right? Like yeah. Barcelona or somewhere nice.
Sure, yeah. Let's meet in Barcelona for fine. Yeah, so that's one thing everyone can look forward to. It's a new event that we'll do coming up. Okay, let me pick one for a Camunda BPM one. Nele, do you see any there that you're interested in? Is this one here from Reshma, Nele, that you're interested in taking?
I mean, that's one I see for Camunda. Well, I don't know. Is it for Camunda BPM or for Zeebe? It doesn't.
Let's do both. Let's do both. Let's first start. Yeah, let's start with you, and then we'll get Mauricio to explain how it works in Zeebe.
Perfect. Yeah. So let me show you something, and I think BPMN as a notation here is your best friend because. Where's the modeler? In the modeler, if you assume you have a task, you performed this one and it has been done successfully, and now maybe, well, in the end or at some point you realize you don't need that task anymore, you want to roll it back. And actually BPMN provides us here with a nice feature of an event that is called compensation. So whenever you decide, for example, with a question, at the endpoint that you need to redo something, you can use or you can throw a compensation here. And the compensation can be attached to any task that has been performed before. So you catch it here with a catch event. And then you can use a task here to undo what you have done in this task. So actually in BPMN, it's very nice. So you can say cancel action A, and this was maybe action A. So you see BPMN offers you a really nice construct of dealing with those rollbacks, and you also have it visually in your diagram here. You could even do it, you can do it for service tasks, but of course you could also do it for a user task. So if a user has performed an action, you also could roll back the action that the user task has done at that point. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Neil. That's really, really good. That has laid down quite the gauntlet for Salaboy to follow, yes. I think.
Totally,
okay,
yeah.
What you got, Mauricio? Bring it on.
So, Nele, can you share your screen again?
Yes, so, of course, I can do that.
Use the same diagram kind of thing. So in Zeebe, we are like not there yet. So we do not support compensation events, which is something that it's going to come at some point, right? But in Zeebe, it's important to mention that in contrast with Camunda VPN, where you can define transactions by saying, is this a Java listener or is this an external thing that it's going to happen? In Zeebe, it's always external, right? There is no way to define in Zeebe something that it's going to run inside the Zeebe cluster itself. Everything is going to be external. Everything is going to be delegated out to a third party. And that third party is what we call a Zeebe worker. I think that, yeah, I share a link with Niall and about like Zeebe workers, but we can show that later on. And yeah, so we will, that's how it's going to work transaction wise on the Zeebe side. We will just execute everything externally. If something goes wrong in a service task, that workflow instance is going to still be there, right? Like it's going to retry using that Zeebe worker several times until it's, there is run out of retries. And then at that point in operate, you will be able to see that there is an incident and then you can decide what to do with it. So there are no like in-memory kind of like transactions as in Camunda VPN. Everything is external, and that makes a lot of sense in these distributed systems where you don't really want to put any source code, any code execution inside the CB cluster, which is executing your workflows. You want to just move that outside. We are getting a question here in the chat. Yeah, but that's all about what I have about transactions, because in CB it's quite simple. Everything is external.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot, Mauricio. And also thanks to Nele for helping out Mauricio with some visuals there.
Yes.
Well done. I thought you guys would be competing. I guess not. Okay, so question in the chat. Can you guys just make that question in the other thing that we can see it there? One question. Now we're running out of time, so not running out, but I want to get to this one. Does Zeebe allow modeling CNN and DMN models as Camunda? This is just the most recent question, but so people haven't had time to vote on it. But I think it's relatively clear. First of all, Camunda BPM models, executes, and constantly updates DMN. This also exists theoretically. In Camunda, we don't really do too much with that engine anymore, but it does exist. I'm actually not sure exactly what the plan is. Mauricio, do you have any, I'm not sure if you do or not, any indication about whether this is something on the roadmap?
Yes, so basically we know for sure that CB is now focused on BPMN, and we are trying to implement more and more of the BPMN standard. DMN is going to come, but not as CB. DMN can be executed on its own. So we have, in Camunda, we have the DMN service itself. We might be able to interact from CB to that DMN execution service. But I don't know what the plans are currently. I'm pretty sure that that's coming along the lines, because it makes a lot of sense to use BPMN and DMN together. And that's so common that we want to support that as soon as possible in CB as well. But that's not in the roadmap as far as I know. In the short-term roadmap, I would say.
Awesome. I want to just clarify as well, the question there was asking about whether to start a new project with Zeebe or Camunda. That really depends a lot. They're quite different. Usually you'd have very different use cases for deciding on one. I mean, personally, I think the default should be start with Camunda BPM. Right now, unless there are reasons why Camunda BPM does not suit your use case. That is purely because Zeebe is still a very fast production, very fast iterations, and therefore you would need to take into account the fact you need to update Zeebe quite a lot. Features that don't exist now that will exist, like compensation, for instance, that it doesn't exist yet but will, could mean that models you do now might be better in a year when you have more symbols available. So from my personal perspective, because I quite like Camunda BPM because I work with it almost all the time, I would say that your best bet is actually to start with Camunda BPM as your default, unless you decide to say, oh, okay, actually Camunda BPM isn't fast enough, or it's not, I want a more cloud native thing. But I would say within the next year or so, maybe 2 years, they'll be basically equal in terms of cloud readiness, but production readiness. And at that point, it'll be purely based on whether you would actually want to, whether your use case defines fast throughput, cloud native versus high user focus and a more relational databases. Okay. Hopefully that's useful. Cool. Thanks very much, guys. Let's see. Ooh, we are getting close, so we'll do one more. Is there any question there? We'll do one more question before going into well, maybe two more. We'll see how we get on. Is there anything there from you, Mauricio, that you want to actually talk about?
There was one about Helm, I think.
Yes.
We start.
There was one. Helm charts. Yeah. Are there plans to maintain a set of charts for diff Zeebe versions? Yeah. Can you go to that?
Yes. So instead of like answering the questions, it's like more recommending people to create issues, right? So if they really want that, please go and create an issue saying, yeah, we want, a Helm chart support for this CB specific version. In general, because it's a community maintained thing, we are just trying to go with latest and greatest all the time, which basically means that if you're running an old version, it's sometimes hard to upgrade to use latest and greatest, but that's kind of like the approach that we're following now. I've been getting these questions quite a lot, not only from outside Camunda, also from inside. And we need to make some decisions around it. After now in 0.23, the main idea is that there are not breaking changes from newer versions. So upgrading Helm charts and Zeebe versions should go smoothly instead of just breaking everything and reinstalling everything from scratch. So hopefully that situation gets better, but the question is still valid. Should we support different Helm charts and different streams, different version streams for different Zeebe version? I'm tempted to say that we shouldn't do that for the sake of simplicity, but I do understand that some people might want that. If you really want that, if you really need that, please go ahead and create an issue. And let's make sure that if you're also interested in that, you abort that issue so we know that that's a real need and we can follow that up and we can plan for that in the next 3 months.
That's awesome. And for those sort of things, if you guys are interested in Zeebe in more detail, go to zeebe.io and go to the forum link there as well. I'll answer one more question. I did promise I would answer a question here. And this doesn't specify which engine, so I'm going to answer for both. So is there a way to restart a flow from the middle based on the state information recorded in Elastic? Now, because it says in Elastic, I assume that means Zeebe. So, but first, I want to try and brag about Camunda BPM, but you can absolutely start from anywhere you like in Camunda BPM. And I'm not sure if that exists in Zeebe, but maybe you can let me know, Mauricio.
Yes, it doesn't exist right now, but definitely it's a common requirement that we are getting kind of like a lot in the Zeebe team. It's going to take some time to implement that. It's not that easy to get that done. Mostly because you need to make sure that whatever you store in Elasticsearch is enough to be able to recreate the state. And I think that as far as I understood right now, it's not. But that's something that it will bring such a nice set of features that I'm pretty sure that the team is going to work on that at some point. It's not currently in the roadmap, so don't get excited, but definitely I take the point. And again, another quick thing about like going and creating an issue, saying it would be really nice to have this kind of feature because it's going to provide, very valuable stuff when we are operating or when we are like migrating from different environments and stuff, and we want to recreate state. So yeah, feel free to go and open an issue because the team it's going to be interested in understanding that that's coming from community. It's not coming from someone inside Camunda saying, yeah, it would be really nice to have that.
Awesome, thanks a lot. Also, it's important to know that we already, let's move on to see if, because I think I need to spin ahead here and let's see if I can switch slides. Oh no, you know what? I do this, click this button. There we go. Okay, so we did that. We're great. Well done, everybody. Now, there's two things I want to mention. As always, near the end of these question corners, I like to remind people that we do other stuff. There's a whole bunch of things coming. Now, because Question Corner is myself and Luca's thing that we do, and Nele as well, of course, we want to promote other stuff that we happen to be doing. And we did a Camunda Code Studio recently, which was a 3-hour workshop online, which was really fun. We're going to do another one pretty soon. In the next 2 months, maybe. I'm not really sure. We haven't got a date yet, but just so you know, it is coming soon. If you, we had a wait list for it. It was a really popular event. We weren't planning on doing another one, but we definitely will. So keep in contact with us, join the forum. And of course, there is a way to keep in contact with what we're actually doing and find out when that coming soon date will be changed into something more reasonable. And I have a slide for that. Luca, do you want to explain this little thing?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Luca, and I'm the Community Marketing Manager at Camunda. And we will publish our very first community newsletter very soon to give you all the first-hand information. And I will post a link here in the chat. So you can, on the bottom of this page, there's a sign-up form. And if you want to get the newsletter, then you can sign up there. So we will share with you news from our desk, so community extensions, also content highlights, of course, and community contributions. So yeah, and then Mauricio, I think you're going to talk at a conference soon. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, so there is like a conference next week called J Nation. That's a conference that was hosted in Portugal, but now it's an online event. I will be talking next week. I will be talking about like Kubernetes and Java and microservices and how you can use Zeebe when you are going through these, migrations and creating like these distributed systems. So you can sign up there. I just shared the link here in the chat, in the Zoom chat. If you're interested in that conference, it's free. So, it's free. So I totally recommend you guys to take a look at that.
Super. Thanks so much, guys. I'm looking forward to that. I'm very much looking forward to the newsletter because I constantly get questions about finding out what's going on with Camunda because we've such a huge amount of material and code contributions. Finally, the question corner, of course, will be going on for a while after this. We'll be doing this probably every 3 weeks or so. And we're interested in what kind of special guests we want. Obviously, we had various requests for someone from Zeebe to come on, hence Salaboy came along. So I'm interested from you lovely people, what kind of guests you would like to have to answer very specific questions. Not that I can guarantee any of this, but if you're interested, you can let us know who you would like to see join myself and Nele answering questions. If you're interested in stuff from the core BPMN team, if you're interested in more modular orientated things, more BPMN.io questions, JavaScript stuff that I certainly can't answer. Also optimize, which is something that I know very little about, but I do know at least one dev who would very happily come on to chat about optimize and take any questions you might have. Also, we have members of the consulting team. If you're interested in use cases, in actual like practical building stuff like Nele tends to talk about as well, we also could bring on someone else with other experience as well as Nele from her team as well. So vote on this and then we can try and see the kind of people we could have in future question corners. While that particular vote is going along, how are we getting on? Oh, fantastic. Look at that timing. 1 minute. So I would, of course, while this vote is happening, thanks very, very much for everybody, all of you people for coming along and asking questions. This is a fun little event that I really couldn't happen without you guys showing up, answering questions and sticking around for the event. Yeah, thanks a lot. And thanks, Mauricio, for joining. Thank you very, very much for Nele as well for joining, of course, Luca for organizing everything behind the scenes. And we will again be doing this again in 3 weeks with more questions. So if you didn't get your thing answered, feel free to drop another line in to us next time. Thanks a million, everybody. This will be recorded. You will be, 18th of June. Yeah, thank you. I shouldn't just say randomly 3 weeks. 18th of June is the time. The recording of this talk will go online at some stage very soon. I will post the recording on the forum, so forum.camunda.org, where this post was made, and you can find the link there. I think, Luca, do you also email the link to that as well after this? I have no idea. Do you? Probably. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Oh, we do?
Yeah,
Great.
we will send out the link to it with a follow-up email.
Yes,
just to mention, it's like there were a lot of like CV questions that were not answered. So let's make sure that people can understand that they can go to the CV Slack channel and just drop the questions there in the general, channel, and we will try to answer as many as we can.
Awesome, thanks, Mauricio. That's brilliant. So thanks again, Mauricio, for even answering more questions. So and I'll see everyone again, I assume, along, of course, my fabled Hawk, who I assume will also join us next time as well, from the depths of Ireland, where the Hawk, of course, lives happily coding in Python, ironically, because it is, of course, what they eat is snakes, especially Harris hawks like this one. So thanks again, everybody, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.